Hello and welcome to Heroic Media. I'm Patrick Cordova.
And I'm Michelle Bauman.
This week on Heroic Media, Pope Francis warns the sacrament of marriage is being reduced to a mere association.
A high court in the UK gives one mother permission to euthanize her disabled daughter.
A leader with the organization Students for Life shares her story.
Stay tuned for all these stories and more here on Heroic Media. So here at Heroic Media, we deal with news headlines that really deal with very foundational topics, life, marriage, and family.
Yes.
And we focus on those because they're so fundamental to the rest of society.
Absolutely, they're very important topics, and a lot of times we'll talk about abortion, euthanasia, embryonic stem cell research, human cloning, and homosexual marriage.
Exactly. So Patrick, what's our first story for the day?
All right, in our first story, the Pope recently spoke up about marriage at an audience in Rome, saying what is being proposed is not marriage at all. So pretty interesting because recently there's been, ever since Pope Francis became Pope, it seems like there's been all kinds of dissension, especially amongst what you might call like conservative Catholics and stuff. They're very worried about, him trying to like loosen the teachings of the church or something like that. But he really just has a different approach to these topics, I guess, with discussing these topics with people and approaching people about these things. So this was a very I guess, firm, to the point affirmation, obviously, that not only can he not, but he has not changed the teachings of the church.
Absolutely, and I think it was sad that these comments were not covered very widely in the media. They'll jump on anything that seems to suggest a change in church teaching. Who am I to judge? Anything like that.
Yeah.
But then when he speaks out very boldly and very clearly, the media don't cover it. And so, I think this is why we have people who are saying, "Wait a second, what's happening?" They're sort of concerned
Exactly.
that what's the Pope doing here. But let's take a look at what he actually said. What are some of the things that he said?
Yeah, he said a lot of great things, right? So one of the things that stood out was that he said. There are these new forms of unions, right? He's talking about these new forms. I like that he used the word new forms because that's really what it is. It's just a new form, and it's basically been kind of transformed also. He says now that it's more of an association, right?
Very
and I
interesting.
think that that's really what it is too, because that's how people nowadays view marriage, right? It's an association. Once you make it an association, it's not this special thing between a man and a woman. It can now be, according to certain civil laws, that it can be between a man and a man and a man and a woman, or who knows what else it will morph into, right? And so, yeah, it's been watered down. And then another thing I thought that was real interesting was that he said, just about the family in general, right? Like anything is family. And I thought that was real interesting because I remember like probably 8 or 9 years ago, however long it was ago that I was in college, that I remember my girlfriend at the time, wife now, she was going through a class and it was like some sort of sociology class or something. They're talking about the family, and one of the questions on that test was about, here's 5 examples, which one of these is a family? And the answer that they wanted you to say was all of the above. And it was like all these different crazy arrangements and all this stuff. And so that really stood out to me a lot because I had experienced that kind of, I guess, almost firsthand,
Sure.
many years ago.
Right, yeah. And I think, the Pope is responding so strongly to this. He's saying there's this common view in society that you can call everything family. But then he says, what is being proposed is not marriage, it's an association, but it's not marriage. It's necessary to say these things very clearly, and we have to say it. So he's calling us to speak up on this, and
Absolutely.
he says the family is being hit, the family is being struck, and the family is being bastardized.
Yeah.
That's a very
Strong
strong
words.
language, very strong language.
Yeah.
He's saying these new forms of unions are totally destructive and limiting the greatness of the love of marriage. I think these are possibly the strongest words that we've heard from our Holy Father on marriage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's important for us to realize this, that the church's teaching on marriage is not going to change. It's not,
Exactly.
this isn't going to happen. And it's important, like he's saying, for us to speak up, to clarify this, to make people understand this.
Right, and that's one of the things that I was glad that he said too. that he was saying, we need to stand up, we need to go out, into the world, and we need to discuss these things with people. He said we aren't saviors of anyone, but rather we just have to transmit this. We're transmitters of Jesus, and we have to, he's the one that does the saving, right? But we need to be we need to transmit this truth to people. And so, he really said that we need to go out, and that's just such a constant theme, it seems like,
right.
especially nowadays, about just going out and evangelizing. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Holy Spirit chose Pope Francis, is like we really need kind of a resurgence of that evangelical type of go out into the world, speak the truth, but do it with love and charity. And Pope Francis is kind of trying to, I think he's doing a really good job, but people are having a hard time understanding that maybe there's different ways that you can speak the truth and that you can share the truth with other people without just coming out and seeming, like, here's a list of rules, right? And I think everybody's at a different point in faith in their life.
Sure.
And so he meets people where they're at. And so I think that he's trying to teach everybody that that's what we need to do.
Absolutely.
And this little meeting here, I think it really, this audience really showed that he's not changing, like we already said, he's not changing things, but that obviously the truth is what the truth is.
Absolutely. So. And to give a little bit of context, some of the confusion that's come up involving this involved this synod that happened recently, which was a gathering of bishops from all over the world in Rome. And during that time, there were some proposals, and there was a document that came out part way, a draft document that involved some language talking about that some people found shocking with the language involving homosexuality. And to put this in context, this document is the midterm document that was then changed before the end of the synod.
Okay.
And this synod is only a preparation for next year's synod.
Right.
And that synod will produce a document that is an advisory document that will go to the Pope. And then over the course of the next year, he can look at that document, he can take what he wants from it, discard what he doesn't want, and he will create a final apostolic exhortation a year after that. So we're very early in the process. This stuff gets revised fairly early on.
Absolutely.
So if people are hearing reports that the church is announcing changes in church teaching, that's not what's happening. This is a very long process, and we trust that the Holy Spirit is guiding the outcome. It's guiding the church. We don't have to worry that the church is in danger here.
Absolutely. That's a great summary. Thanks. In our next story, a mother in the UK won her case recently to kill her disabled daughter. This is very notable also because it's the first time that a child who is breathing on her own, is not on life support, has no terminal illness, has been allowed to be killed. So in the UK as well. So this story takes place in the UK. So this is, it's very disturbing on multiple levels.
Absolutely.
What were your first reactions to hearing about this? Well, I guess first let's give a little bit of background,
Sure.
right? So this girl was 12 years old. And her mother, she was born with a lot of defects and had a lot of health issues. She couldn't speak, she couldn't walk. She had a feeding tube. She had to be fed and given water. Basically, it sounded like her mother started experiencing basically what she said were issues with her daughter, where her daughter was in severe pain, right? And to me, it sounded like she was kind of getting on an emotional level in order to win over the judge to say, hey, let's put this girl out of her misery. And I think when you read it from an emotional perspective, what she was saying, it makes sense, right? You like tie into it and you're like, oh yes, she should be put out of her misery. But what the judge ordered was anything but merciful, right? And basically he said, yes, let's pull her, don't feed her anything. Basically let her starve and dehydrate to death, which is exactly what happened after 14 days.
And I think that's absolutely heartbreaking. It's so concerning that we're seeing more and more of these cases.
Right.
Not surprising, but definitely concerning. We saw this with Brittany Maynard, who was hailed as a hero
Right.
for ending her own life
Right.
because she had terminal cancer. And then in this case, you have a little 12-year-old girl, and the mom says, nope, we need to kill her. And the judge who decided this decided, oh, you have no quality of life anymore.
Exactly.
You can be killed. And the judge actually praised the mother for the love and devotion that she had shown in seeking to kill her daughter. So heartbreaking. And you look at how this goes. This article gave a pretty graphic description of what happens when you die by starvation.
Exactly.
And it took 14 days. It took 2 weeks for this girl to die. It's a gruesome process, and it describes how the cells start shrinking, the brain
Right.
ruptures, the kidney fails. We don't have to go into all the details. It's pretty gruesome. But this is anything but merciful.
Exactly.
The author said, we don't treat dogs this way. We don't execute murderers in such a cruel manner.
Right.
If a serial killer on death row was executed by forcing them to undergo starvation and dehydration, there would be widespread outrage.
Absolutely.
And yet this disabled little girl, it's okay.
Right, exactly. And then, something that had popped into my mind regarding this too is it's almost like it was meant to be a gateway to legalize euthanasia in the UK, because it's not currently legal in the UK.
Right.
And so, because you could try to say, well, they didn't have to draw it out if they could have given her a pill. I'm playing devil's advocate here. You know what I mean? And so it's such a slippery slope, and I mean, God only knows what was on this mother's heart, right? Truly in her heart. But, from my perspective, from some of the things that she said, it seemed like she was being very self-centered about, I feel this way. I can't bear seeing her like that. Me, right? It wasn't the focus seemed to more be on herself rather than be on her daughter and, providing palliative care or something like that for her.
Right.
So it was tragic on multiple levels, right? And I mean, it was difficult to
Absolutely, it was
stomach.
heartbreaking. So we absolutely need to pray as these kind of things become more and more common.
Absolutely.
Coming up after the break, we'll talk with a young pro-life leader about walking the talk on a college campus.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Heroic Media. Lauren Castillo was an active pro-life teen working to revamp the pro-life groups at her high school and college. But it was when she faced her own unplanned pregnancy that she gave the ultimate pro-life witness. So this is a very interesting story. Yeah. I was actually able to sit down and speak with Lauren, who is now the Rocky Mountain Regional Coordinator for Students for Life. Let's go ahead and take a look at what she said. Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.
You have done so much work over the last several years in the pro-life movement. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you've done?
Yeah, so I think really, I've always been pro-life and my family raised me to be pro-life, but I didn't really truly understand what it meant to be a pro-life leader until high school. And so I became involved around 2008, really, I became a pro-life leader. And so I wasn't just going to events, I started organizing events. And so I went out to the March for Life in DC my senior year of high school, and that was when it really transformed me. And I understood not only do I have the company of millions of other pro-life youth, but I can actually go back and start a club at my high school, and I can help my community and reach out to those in need. And so that's what I did. I started a club in high school. I went on to college, both locally near Denver, Colorado, and so went on and I transformed the pro-life club at Regis University, where it was, kind of active when I started, but after I got in touch with Students for Life of America and really started to use the resources and the training they offered us for free, it was awesome because we were able to go out to DC again, 11 of us, and attended the conference, and we were able to fundraise from local Knights of Columbus councils and other supporters in the area, and really we were able to get educated and get the tools we needed to come back and start things like our Pregnant on Campus initiative and to reach out to pregnant and parenting students and really learn how to educate our community on fetal development and abortion and post-abortive resources. And it was awesome because the Pro-Life Club at both my high school and my college that I helped start are still going.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
It's great to see that kind
exciting.
of involvement. Now, one of the criticisms that sometimes comes up against pro-life people is that, how can you judge this woman's decision when you've never experienced an unplanned pregnancy? But that's not quite the case for you, is it?
Totally, yeah, it's totally not. And I think it's really interesting because, my story, I was going into my senior year of college and I became pregnant, and it was a scary moment because it wasn't only scary, you're facing unplanned pregnancy now, but you're facing an unplanned pregnancy at a small Catholic university where you're really involved. You're involved in university ministry, you're involved, I was double majoring in accounting and theology, I was working on an honors thesis, and then I was the pro-life club leader. And so I really had to walk my talk, and it was hard. And, I think it took me from not having an understanding. You know, I think I always talk to people who said, well, it's an understandable decision. And I didn't know what that meant. I said, no, abortion is unthinkable. But until you're in that moment of crisis, you don't understand all of the emotions around there. And so it really kind of helped me learn how to effectively approach and help other women who are facing unplanned pregnancies, particularly in college or even high school, to say, hey, I know all the emotions that you're facing and I know the fears that are legitimate that you have, but we can work through this and get you the support and resources you need. And hey, I've been there. I know what you're going through. And so they're able to trust me a little bit more.
Absolutely. Was it difficult for you to choose life in your circumstances?
No, not for me. I don't think I didn't ever consider abortion. And you know, it helped that I have an amazing family and now an amazing husband, and he's an awesome father to our son, and it's so wonderful. And so that support network outside of, you know, my schooling was really formative in my entire pregnancy, and so it was helpful. It didn't necessarily make anything easier because, I mean, everything that you're facing being a pregnant student, I mean, from carrying really heavy bags to figuring out nobody has a seat for me, I have to sit sideways throughout 9 months of pregnancy. Wow. And so, you know, it wasn't a hard decision, but it didn't make it any easier.
And you mentioned the importance of having that network, that support group. How is Students for Life, now that you're working with them, how are you able to try to offer that and offer those resources and that network to other women who might be experiencing something like that?
Yeah, and I think that Students for Life does an incredible job at this, because not only do we have an entire program that's called the Pregnant on Campus Initiative, where we're bringing these resources to the students to say, hey, let's walk through and figure out how friendly is your campus to pregnant and parenting students, and then you're able to identify areas of growth and areas that we can work with and partner with administration to make those resources more available. So, you know, that's promoting where the diaper decks on campus are, where there's a lactation room, you know, letting the students know who their Title IX coordinator is. And really, the Students for Life clubs on campus become the advocate for those students who are facing a pregnancy, to know that they can go to the Students for Life club leaders and say, hey, I don't know what I'm going to do. You know, if they were in my shoes, my due date was graduation day. Wow. And I ended up going into labor 5 weeks early. But there was nobody advocating on campus besides myself. And so if I would have known, you know, you can take leave and you can work with your professors. And so that's exactly what we're doing with Students for Life, is creating these programs for our club leaders to really take that and build a network. And it's awesome to see, because they, you know, they can say, we can help with babysitting, we can get you in contact with affordable daycare. I'm working with some clubs in the Rocky Mountains that are in the beginning steps to making the childcare on campus more affordable or available to students and not just faculty. And so we're constantly working, and Beth O'Malley, who is our coordinator and for Pregnant on Campus, she's constantly working to see how we can improve our resources, how we can improve our students' level of understanding for how we reach out more effectively to pregnant students.
Wow, that's really incredible. And I just want to say that I'm so impressed, and thank you for your witness and taking your own experience and your own story and using it to concretely reach out and help other women in need.
Definitely. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you for being here.
Awesome.
Well, that was a great chat that you had. I really like that. I love it when people like Lauren share their experience, because it helps everybody else understand, you know?
Right.
And a lot of times, at least in my experience, it seems like people that are not Catholic or not Christian might accuse Catholics and Christians of not, you know, walking the walk or talking the talk, right? Sure. Talking the talk but not walking the walk. And so this is a great example, right? Every single one of us is a sinner, right? We all make mistakes, we all sin, but I think that, you know, obviously we have to follow by the life of Jesus and have forgiveness and correct our sins and get on the right path. And she's like a perfect example of that. And, you know, she had a great opportunity to walk the walk.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Not just talk the talk. And so, I mean, sometimes, even in my own experience, I felt like in college dealing with pro-life people, it seems like they're not in touch with reality. And so sometimes stories like this help to kind of bridge that gap a little bit. What do you think?
I think so, absolutely. And I loved the way that she said she was able to relate to pregnant women after that, and to say, you know, I realize how scary this is, and it was never an option for her. She didn't really consider abortion because her pro-life convictions were so strong, but that she was able to say, I understand where they're coming from now, and that when women approach her now and say, no, you don't understand, this is difficult, and here's why, she can say, I do understand, and you're right, it is difficult, and I know what it's like, but I've gotten through it, and so can you. Let me help you. And I think that is exactly the attitude we need, the compassionate response to women in need that we need to be giving.
Absolutely. And another thing that she talked about was, you know, that she, in making that pro-life choice, was that the support was just so good that it made it easy for her to make that pro-life decision as well. And I think support is key too, right? We need to be a supportive community to those people that, you know, those women that may have had an out of wedlock pregnancy and are considering an abortion or things like that. All instances of pro-life, whether it be abortion or not. But yeah, and you know, God doesn't want us to live our lives as lukewarm Catholics. He wants us to live our life to the fullest, right? And so this was just a great example, right? And I think sharing those positive stories just helps the community, helps people out, and I'm very happy that she was able to do that for us.
Absolutely.
So. All right, stay tuned. Coming after the break, we have one final story. Welcome back to Heroic Media. In case you're just joining us, I'm Patrick Cordova.
And I'm Michelle Bauman. In our final story for the day, pregnancy is a beautiful and awesome thing, but it can also be difficult, physically, mentally, and emotionally. One author is calling the pro-life movement to recognize and respond to this truth.
Interesting.
So, Patrick, you've never been pregnant. I've never been pregnant. But I think this article brings up some interesting points. And just, you know, your wife has had children, has, you know, gone through that. You've gone through that with her. And just in watching people and knowing people who have gone through pregnancy, I think there's some really interesting points that this article brings to light.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And my wife is pregnant right now, so this is kind of hits home.
You can relate a little bit.
Yeah, I can relate a little bit more, especially. Obviously, like you said, I have no idea what it's like to be pregnant, but just coming from my perspective, I do see where this article is coming from, and I think that the article really brings up some great points. This author brings up some great points because one of the things, like she mentions the National Organization of Women now, right? So they are, you know, a pro-choice group, but they really are able to acknowledge truths, right? Things that people actually do experience, right? And let's face it, pregnancy is very difficult, right? And we might not have firsthand experience, but we know, you know, people that we know that have been pregnant, and hearing people's stories that it is difficult. And I think as Christians, we just need to put that all in perspective also. And she doesn't mention this necessarily in what I'm going to say, but you know, this is all due to, it's all explained in the fall and of humanity, the story of in Genesis, right? Because that's when pregnancy became painful, right? That's when childbirth and everything, all of these things happen, right? And so, but yeah, I think that it's great that to acknowledge these truths, right? Because so many times the pro-life movement will just say, oh, everything's so great, children are wonderful, and blah, blah, blah. And they don't acknowledge that there are things that are kind of bad about pregnancy, right? Like you're going to go through emotional ups and downs. You're going to be sick. Some women, you know, just glow, so to speak, but others do not.
Right, exactly. And I think, you know, the point she's making here is that there is this mixed bag. You've got this glow and you've got this very beautiful thing happening. Your body is nourishing this new life, and that's beautiful. Yeah. But then you also have the nausea. You have the exhaustion. You have, for some cases, hormonally induced depression. Right. So this is difficult. And, you know, she's very strong about what she says. Pregnancy can be a personal disaster for a variety of reasons. Now, to give some context, the author here is pregnant with her 6th child by choice.
Yes.
And she actually says, look, I am doing this on purpose because having kids is totally worth it.
Right.
But I have to say, I hate being pregnant. And so she's saying, hey, pro-lifers, we have to acknowledge how difficult this is. Because if we just act like, oh, pregnancy, how wonderful, isn't it great when you're pregnant all the time?
Right.
That's not acknowledging the real suffering that women face. And women are going to be more inclined to choose abortion if we tell them, no, you have to be happy the entire time you're pregnant. You're
Right.
never allowed to feel sad. You're not allowed to feel sick. You just have to have this huge smile on your face the whole time.
Exactly.
And she's saying that's just not realistic.
Exactly, and that's the whole point of the article, I think, at least what I got out of it, and it makes sense, right? Because you have these pro-abortion organizations that are saying, oh man, pregnancy does suck, all this stuff about it, like saying all these awful things, they're just basically agreeing with all the issues that they're having, and that's what the pro-life side of, needs to do a little bit better at, they need to connect with these women where they're at instead of being maybe unrealistic about some of the hard truths about pregnancy. And, she mentions when she was in front of an abortion clinic before, and like all these pro-life people came out, pro-choice people came around her and like kind of surrounded this woman that was going into an abortion clinic, and they held hands and like basically protected her from these pro-life folks, and it really flips the tables, right? And so it's almost like how do you turn that back around to where it should be, where the people that are protecting her are actually the people that should be, which is the pro-life people. And I think that connecting on that level about simple truths about pregnancy, that it isn't all easy peasy, right, and happy joy, I think is very important as well.
Yeah, I think that the attitude that we should have is don't deny that this is a sacrifice in many ways. Acknowledge that it's a sacrifice, but help show people it's a sacrifice worth making. And
Exactly.
The point that she makes, women immersed in a religious landscape frequently feel pressure to act happy and bear their maternal miseries with pious silence. Lamenting pregnancy seems to border on blasphemy. So
Right.
I thought that was really interesting. This
Yeah.
is, but we look at the redemptive mystery of the cross, and she delves a little bit into this. This is a sacrifice, from morning sickness to weight gain to hormones, labor and delivery. You are offering yourself for your
Yes.
child. This is
Yes.
beautiful, but we don't have to say it's beautiful despite all of this. We don't have to ignore this suffering. We say this is beautiful in its suffering, and what
Absolutely.
can we do to help you through this?
Right, and as Christians, we can see that Jesus Christ is the same way, right? He put all this suffering for good, right? And same thing with women, right? They do all this suffering, but it's for good, for life. And so I think we can kind of, as Christians, lean on that.
Sure, that absolutely.
All right, that's it for this week on Heroic Media. Please join us next week for all the up-to-date news on the pro-life issues that matter to you.
Please feel free to write to us with any comments, questions, or news tips at news@heroicmedia.org.
And please visit our website at heroicmedianews.org, where you can read more stories like the ones we discussed on this episode.
That's it for this week. Until next time, keep us in your prayers.
God bless.